changing to now. Apparently in some locations it worked, in others it did not, but I see many more people here, which is great. So yes, let's kick off. Thank you for the quick introduction, Bas. Tina, to you.
Thank you, Stella. So again, welcome also from IKEA Social Entrepreneurship. So my name is Tina and I work for IKEA Social Entrepreneurship, obviously. Before we dive deeper into the work and insights from the campfire conversations, we would like to share some context, me and Stella. So this work is grounded in a collaborative partnership between Ashoka, IKEA Social Entrepreneurship and the United Nations Development Programme, the Accelerator Labs network, and with support from Circular Economy. So it all started with some curious conversations between IKEA Social Entrepreneurship and UNDP. And we were curious about the Accelerator Labs, and together we were exploring collective learning. And the more we talked, the more we thought this could be also interesting for IKEA Social Entrepreneurship partner Ashoka as well. And we thought this could fit very well into the partnership we have with them. So all of us, we came together to explore what we could do together. So Stella, say some more about the Ashoka and IKEA Social Entrepreneurship Partnership and
yes,
what came out of coming together.
Happy to. Thank you, Tina. So a little bit about the background of our partnership. Ashoka and IKEA Social Entrepreneurship have been working together, have been joining forces since 2019. And our overarching vision is systems that deliver better to the needs of vulnerable people and to a more sustainable and resilient society. And we have been running accelerator programs for 5 years now together, offering individual support to social entrepreneurs. And for the past 6 months, we are also offering collective impact support to groups of stakeholders, including social entrepreneurs. So it also felt from all three sides a very natural partnership, a very natural initiative. All three of our organizations have large networks that are also complementary. So we really jumped into bringing them together and inviting all of our organizations and different stakeholders to learn together, to explore the topic of the intersection of circularity and informality, and to really bring back learnings both to our organizations but also to key stakeholders on a topic of joint interest. We then also realized that we would need support to do that. So we very gladly invited Circular Economy to work with us to document the whole process, the insights, and of course lead the knowledge product production. And as our work evolved, we realized that it actually moved even beyond the scope and the skirts of our partnership. So both for IKEA Social Entrepreneurship and Ashoka, we realized that we were inviting stakeholders from our broader networks that were not necessarily part of the accelerator. It's also an experiment for us. It's the first time we are so intentional and doing something beyond our program with the goal of collecting and disseminating knowledge. And we are very glad that we did this experiment, and we are here to present the output of it to all of you, and also hear from all of you. So thank you very much from our side as well, and handing over to Bas.
Thanks, Stella. Let me, before we move on, explain a little bit about this idea of learning circles. Let's say our key method to, oh, no, I kind of, oops. Yes, this one. That we have used for learning together. And the best way to do that is as often with an image. So, but it's as Tina said, it's we're curious not just only about how we can become smarter together, but also we had an interest in circularity and informality. We weren't kind of actually sure what we were looking for, so we just delved straight in, as we kind of often do. Instead of over engineering a partnership, we just started doing. So we also, in a way, we want to acknowledge that the knowledge that came out of it, of these learning circles, is more to complement also the formal knowledge that is there. There is already a lot of knowledge, but often that's, let's say, abstract and decontextualized. So we felt there was also something missing. For example, what we see with the labs, but also what came out of the conversations with the social entrepreneurs, is that when you look at a grassroots level, is that there are fairly efficient circular systems that are driven by informal workers. And Loom, for example, one of our colleagues is on the call. It was a very clear example from Vietnam that we have seen many, many years ago already. And that also kind of inspired a little bit of this thinking of that the learning circles are focused also to elevate that local knowledge and these perspectives from these realities. Because we believe that this local knowledge will also help us to drive sustainable development. But there is also, when you look at this local knowledge, it's also, let's say, hard to access. Much of it is tacit and not codified. And I think when it comes to tacit knowledge, there is a beautiful quote from Dave Snowden, who says, "We know more than we can tell, and we tell more than we can write down." And often when we try to capture our knowledge, we try to write it down. But there is also a lot of value in telling and talking about things. So that's kind of what we try to do with the learning circles. The main modality is basically that we talk about our experiences, about our observations, the prototypes, the experiments that we have run, and what we have learned from that. So the idea is very similar. It's kind of inspired by the African campfire, where you sit together in a circle, as you can see here on this photo. This was actually the first learning circle that we did in Almholt in June 23, I believe, or July. Memory is not that good anymore, but so you sit in the circle and you have this almost kind of free roaming conversation about a topic. But at the center of the conversation is a learning question. As you can see, we put it here on the ground, on the floor, to keep the conversation focused. So, and the aim of these conversations is actually also to bring in these multiple perspectives and voices that are usually not involved or included in these conversations. So we had three of those campfire conversations or learning circles, and we had three questions that we had for these conversations. The first one is fairly open-ended. What does informality and circularity look like in your reality? And we were interested also to learn a little bit more about how circularity and informality are connected, how they are interacting with each other, these two systems. The second learning circle that we did in November 2023, the main question we focused on, what does it look like when circularity and informality meet? Focusing a bit more on what impact it generates, the conditions that are needed to perform, but also the actors and their roles in these local ecosystems. And then in April 2025, we concluded the series with a slightly more advanced question. So what is currently in place to ensure recognition rights and the enabling environment for informal micro small entrepreneurs, workers in the field of circularity? So that's a bit of a mouthful, but we were also kind of specifically looking about what are these enablers and gaps that drive this recognition and rights and these things. So it's often happens with these learning circles. We often start with a very broad question, and then we narrow it down a little bit. But what we have done, we have brought, with the help of Circular Economy, brought all our insights together, and that came together in this white paper that we are presenting today. But before we start sharing with these insights, let me hand over to Apurva for a quick quiz. And I'll stop sharing. Yes.
Yes. And lovely to be here, everyone. See you all online today. We just have a few questions to get us kick-started before we go into our presentation. So, Renata, can I ask you to do the honors? So ideally, if this works well, we should all have a question pop up on our screen. Yes, there we go.
Sorry, I think you closed the poll. I didn't submit, but it was closed, and then it says the results are being shown on the screen at 100% for each answer. I'm not sure if it's just me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I?
The same thing happened to me. Yeah.
Sorry. Is there a way I can unend the poll?
Yeah, I will stop share, but it's still ongoing in my end, the poll. So I'm gonna stop sharing now.
All right. So are you all still able to answer access the poll, or is it? Yeah, I think it's restarted. Thank you for bearing with our technical issues today. Right, we'll probably give it another. I still see responses coming in, so we can give another few seconds and then close. All right. Yeah, I think no new responses coming in, so we can go now and share results. So I think most of you actually got it right. So our first question is, what is the percentage of informal workforce worldwide? And most of you guessed that it's about 60%. So the ILO estimates that more than 60% of the workers around are informal workers, and about 80% of businesses also operate in the informal economy. So that makes up a staggering 2 billion of our population, it just blows my mind every time I hear this, because it's also such an important topic and such a central part of the work that we do, but it's not often given the space that it requires. So I think this is just something for us to pause and reflect. And the second question was about the percentage of workers employed in the informal sector within Sub-Saharan Africa and the Asia and Pacific region. And again, I think most of you got this right, which is 70 to 80%, which is again a huge number. So if you look at specifically within the Sub-Saharan African region, it's about 89% of the population. And within Asia and Pacific, it's about 71% of the population. So these are also regions where we have a larger percentage of the workforce who are employed in the informal sector. also making this, they're also critical parts of our entire journey and value chain. So this is just something that we wanted to share with you before we kick off. But now I'll stop sharing the poll and then start sharing my screen. All right. Hopefully you can all see my screen okay. So I'm Apurva and I'm from Circular Economy. I'm joined by my colleagues today, Sharsha, who's also going to be presenting right after, as well as Esther. And we're part of the team that had the privilege of working with Ashoka, IKEA, and UNDP on this extremely impactful project. And today we're going to be presenting a brief overview of the key findings that emerged from our study. So just to say that our research and our learning circles actually brought up a lot more questions and answers in some ways. So these are definitely the beginnings of some themes that we would like to explore in much more detail. But one of the questions that we asked at the beginning is, who are the key actors who are operating at the nexus of circularity and informality, and what roles do they play in the circular informal nexus? And if we move over to this slide, you can see here that if you look at the figure over here, we have the different stages of a circular value chain. So starting from the sourcing materials phase until the residual phase, waste phase, we have the different stages of a circular value chain. And what we see here is how we cluster these different actors across 3 layers. So in the first layer, we have who we call the grassroots actors. These are basically actors who are, for example, informal workers themselves or local communities. And these are essentially actors who are very close to the ground. And they are key actors in driving circular value chains from the ground up. And what really enables this is their close connection to local context, which allows them to address specific challenges and opportunities. So this is the first layer. If we move on to the next layer, we see over here intermediators. So these are, for instance, social entrepreneurs and networks and accelerators. And these are essentially, the types of actors who act as bridges between grassroots actors and enablers. So they act as bridges between the grassroots and as well as the wider system. And what these actors do is essentially they connect diverse stakeholders and support the growth of successful grassroots initiatives. And therefore, in this way, they kind of play this bridging role. And they also play a key role in scaling innovations from the local level to a broader context and facilitating the exchange of knowledge, resources, and support. And then in the outer layer we have the layer of enablers. And these are basically all the stakeholders like government stakeholders, public institutions, private corporations, financiers, consumers. And these are stakeholders who are critical in setting the right enabling condition in order to, in order to set up this whole context. So they create the overarching conditions necessary for successful implementation and scaling of practices. For instance, when we talk about government stakeholders, they are critical in setting policy directions and regulatory environment that is necessary for circular practices and informal sectors to actually, for the informal sector to thrive. And then we have, public institutions, financiers play a key role in shifting financing from more traditional to social and circular business models. We have private corporations who also play a role. Consumers are critical nowadays in the way that they shape and influence circular trends. So all of these actors have a critical role. And what we're trying to say through this figure in a nutshell is that if we look at the different stages of a circular value chain, informal actors are critical throughout at different segments. So we have highlighted a few snapshots here where their role is even more critical. For instance, if we look at the collection phase as an example, in Morocco, 85% of plastic waste management is conducted by informal workers, just highlighting the huge role that they play. But overall, what the system also shows us is that we need all these different layers of actors in order to make the whole system function effectively. Actors may take on a role from being an enabler to an intermediator to a grassroots actor, but essentially all of them are key in supporting informal workers. And regardless of an actor's proximity to the ground, each of them plays a vital role in the system. So this is the first part of what we explored. What we looked at next is what are the key dilemmas that exist at the intersection of circularity and informality. And here I'll hand over to my colleague Sharsha to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Apurva. So as Baz was saying, there was so much knowledge for us to tap into here. And we approached our findings as dilemmas because we were finding that across the board, the main thing that was being said was that informality, the informal economy, is not one thing, and it's often used from the outside to try and describe this very varied phenomenon. So to try and capture that, we've presented 4 main themes as dilemmas or tensions. So if we go to the next slide, our first theme or dilemma is this issue of stigma and recognition of informal workers. So informal workers' role both in the economy at large, but also circularity and circular economy is often unrecognized and thereby undervalued or even stigmatized. This is particularly the case with waste-related work, informal workers working most closely with waste materials or secondary resources. At the same time, unsafe working conditions and exploitation are likely more common from our findings and discussions within informal spaces. And this issue of overlooking the value of this work is particularly exacerbated in rural and indigenous contexts, where pre-existing circularity is not only undervalued, but not recognized. So this relationship between recognition, stigma, and rights was really a key area of our discussions. The next one is formalization and representation of workers. So formalization emerged as probably one of the strongest dilemmas. It can, but does not always benefit workers. So while informal work tends to be associated with existing vulnerabilities, we also found that there was quite a strong theme that it was not this formalization was not this universalizable solution. The question of if, when, and how informal work should be quote unquote formalized, which we took to mean very broadly integrated or adapted into more formal systems, was very widely debated, and we concluded that there is no neat conclusion to this question. And effectively responding to the issues faced by workers at the intersection of informality and circularity will require deep place-based knowledge and openness. Leading us on to, as you can see, all of these themes and dilemmas intersect quite fluidly with each other as well. So this next theme is this issue of top-down versus grassroots circularity. So throughout our discussions, we sort of found that there were 2 circular economies operating in parallel, which we've summarized through these lenses of grassroots and top-down, but there are many ways this could be discussed, and would be very curious as well to hear if anyone else in this call has ideas about ways of characterizing this split or tension. But grassroots circularity very broadly is activities that are primarily nature-based, community-driven, often emerging as innovative responses on the ground to situations of necessity and perhaps a lack of effective structures or institutions. It tends to be a feature of already existing economies, which tend to be focused in the quote-unquote global south. It also embodies features like, or principles like sufficiency, frugality, and activities like reuse and repair. Also a theme that emerged in connection with this was human-nature relations, and that being fundamentally different within these contexts and economies. This kind of can be very broadly contrasted with top-down circularity, where concepts are somewhat abstracted from on-the-ground activities, tends to be shaped and articulated through global north institutions, and more abstracted and technology and efficiency centric. If we move on to the final dilemma, which is kind of a bit of a meta reflection from our side, which was, what is the relevance of these 2 words, circularity and informality, as lenses? So the scope of the project was to understand rather than to conclusively label. The conversations were so fluid and varied, but what we kind of kept coming back to was, if these lenses are not lenses through which informal workers understand themselves, how can we with these being these broad umbrella terms that we have, kind of do the best we can to actually understand realities on the ground. So yeah, the main way to sum that up would probably be these terms are just a way of life and livelihood. And that was kind of a repeated phrase that kept coming up. It's not informal economy, it's just life, it's just the economy, it's just the work. So then the implications of all these tensions, all these dilemmas, all these findings, we again kind of wanted to keep this quite open and fluid approach. So our findings mainly emerged as research questions and quite broad questions leading into further research. So again, really keen to hear some of your thoughts from your different various disciplines and contexts about ways that these could be approached. But if we talk through just a couple of them, so the first one is, how can we better understand specific vulnerabilities faced by a given group of workers in a specific context? So given this extreme variety and conceptual fluidity, instead of prescribing formalization, how can we better respond, moving from abstract, universalizing solutions to context-specific ones? How can we ensure that recognition aligns with and respects workers' self-perceptions? So this idea of recognizing and recognition as a way to uphold rights, but recognizing in a way that doesn't conflict with and reduce the reality of informal workers' own experiences. How can we recognize informal workers' valuable knowledge of circular practices without further excluding the most marginalized? So we're recognizing increasingly that this work is incredibly valuable, and how can we kind of reapproach and reframe our engagement with these spaces and with these workers in a sort of non-stigmatizing and non kind of negative, I suppose, way, and using this knowledge and recognizing this knowledge for what it is, which is knowledge. And then how can the private sector actors becoming increasingly interested in this work, in these materials, how can they scale circular strategies and be enablers in ways that do not exacerbate existing vulnerabilities or lock informal workers into formal systems in ways that are going to create new vulnerabilities or create new structures of dependency and, I guess, kind of problematic lock-ins. And then finally, what partnerships and coalitions can help to build out existing synergies across this nexus of informality and circularity in given contexts. So social entrepreneurship and the role of grassroots organizations and the way that different coalitions in a given region, country, space can come together to drive more recognition, innovation, and just transition, I suppose, within this space. Big questions, and really keen and excited to explore further and hear what other people think. So I'll pass it back now, I think, to Baz, and thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
We'll actually hand over now to Jens.
Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you very much for that presentation. We see that there's no easy answers here. So we're very eager to hear from our distinguished audience. We have some tricky questions for you that I'm posting in the chat right now. And it's about quite general questions about how these findings resonate with you, what stands out to you, what needs further exploration, and how should that exploration be conducted going forward. So with all these kind of gray cells that we have in listening in here, so please raise your hand or type in the chat and or turn on your video and give us your feedback. We're very open to hearing your thoughts. So I'll be silent for a bit of, we'll have a bit of an awkward silence, and I'll wait for your reactions. Otherwise, I'll start calling people out. I saw a reaction from Hope Kagashima on the insights about lenses and labels. Do you want to feel like elaborating on that?
Jens, would it be possible to put back again the questions in the screen?
Absolutely. It was just general reflections on the presentation, and any feedback or reflections or what comes to mind will be super helpful for all of us.
Yes, colleagues, good afternoon.
Hi, Hope, please.
Hi. Yes, that comment on labels and lenses was very insightful for me. Of course, the work we do here, largely we have a majority of the informal sector in either natural resources, in digitization, in all the solutions really, because we work with a lot of entrepreneurs. So indeed, on their part, all they are doing is a livelihood activity, right? They are just waking up to start do a job, and they are earning an income. And oftentimes we come in with the labels and the evidence, packaging them into certain aspect of whether you're formalized or not. And of course, we've been implementing very good strategies to formalize a lot of the enterprises to enable them, access financing. But there's always, for example, a bit of reluctance sometimes because they associate formalization with either visibility to the taxman or a lot of compliance burden, right? So we have to, in Uganda, we've had to really think inversely to understand that people wake up to earn a living, and their instinct of big investment is not much more into the formalization or zero waste production, if we may call it, but basically how we can enable them to access financing in their state. So for instance, relating access to finance with only formalization sometimes may not work unless we have also helped them understand the enterprise they are undertaking as a business, for example, in terms of having a documented business plan, in terms of helping them understand and communicate their financials, to a banker, whether they are complying to the formalization aspects as we know them. So I found that insight very useful because in livelihood strengthening, it's really helpful to find the communities we are supporting see themselves as part of the vision and goal, but also more importantly, to work with them in their context beyond investing so much in changing their way. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. That's very helpful. And to describe really the realities there, we're trying to translate top down and the situation on the ground. I see Jan Turek, you had a reflection on the top down and grassroots as well. That distinction, is that something you want to elaborate on?
No, just I can tell you like 2 or 3 sentences of what we do, and I found this way to distinguish is very helpful because we so in one word, Circular Valley I work for, and our idea is kind of to establish something like the Silicon Valley, but for the circular economy. And yeah, what made the Silicon Valley what it is on the one hand they had research and like the Stanford University, and they had many industry companies, especially in the semiconductor industry. And then the idea was, and then on the other hand, they had startups from all over the world. And this is basically something that we try to replicate, but not for the digital world, but for the circular economy. And that's why we have a network of company partners And on the other hand, we have startups from all over the world. And that's why I think it's very interesting, because usually our partner companies usually tend to look from a top-down way. And then the startups that we work with, which also often come from the global south, they usually or sometimes more have this this grassroots way of thinking. And yeah, I found it very interesting.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jan.
To connect both sides.
And I see that Nabin has a reflection on Nepal, where perhaps you can even speak of a kind of competition between local informal workers and migration. You have informal workers coming in from India, if I read your reflection correct. Was that the correct reading, Nabin? Okay, we move on. Another reflection I see here in the chat is on the way new approaches can be a threat to the corporate sector. That's of course interesting for us within IKEA to hear about. I see Rosita Singh, you've been writing about that. Would you like to elaborate on that? And I see that Nabin, my interpretation of Nabin's comment was correct. Perhaps if you want to speak, you could raise your hand. We have time for, yeah, just a few comments more. How about Alberto? You speak about the incentives that may be needed to incite the informal economies to actually collect certain materials, for example. Do you want to say something about that?
I stand ready, but I see Rosita has raised her hand, so maybe you want to go back to her first.
Okay, let's do Rosita first.
I can go after you, no worries. It took me a while to find the button, sorry.
Well, go ahead, Rosita, you're speaking now, so.
Okay, sure. So, I mean, on the list of the questions that you had shared on the last slide, there was one with respect to scaling strategies and the role of private sector. So in some cases, actually, we have seen this in India, working with few startups and entrepreneurs, early stage entrepreneurs. What we have seen is that, you know, they have come up with certain business strategies, for instance, refill stations for daily, you know, kind of goods, FMCG products like shampoo, also other kind of like daily needs. But what is happening is with the biggies or the big corporations, I mean, it really threatens their business model of selling products as single use, you know, in plastic bottles. So what we have seen is that these two actors kind of like, there is a lot of tension between them. So while we see private sector maybe supporting few innovation awards or few pilot projects, when it comes to scaling these strategies, which are very important, it seems like there is some tension there because of a risk or a threat to their business. So this is what we are seeing. We are seeing great entrepreneurs, great solutions in India right now, but they're not able to reach the scale. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Rosita. It's certainly something we see in our programs as well when we try to support scaling of social enterprises, for sure. So now, Alberto.
Thank you. Yes. So I was thinking from what I know of this type of this work, informal economies are like super efficient and super granular in the sense that you would see, you know, on the border of a gigantic landfill in the north of Addis Ababa, small specialized huts that will sell you toys or, you know, fractions of waste that are extremely well specialized. So it works really well. And it works at interpreting the signals on what society thinks is valuable and recycling that. So, however, this work is threatened by changes in the price vector. So when I was a boy, we were still recycling paper in a very granular way. The churches organized this. They would send young volunteers, once or twice a year to collect all the used magazines and newspapers of people. This is no longer done because it's no longer profitable. There's the priest cannot raise any more funds doing that. And part of the reason for that is that we are underpricing fresh raw materials. So there is an incorrect pricing of externalities on that stuff. So in a way, even if your informal economy is super efficient, it can only function well, serve society well, if the policy level does not distort the price vector. So this is a bit of a disconnect because you're working down here and everything is fine, but everything is fine. Hopefully everything is fine, but up there, your work would be jeopardized or on the contrary, made more relevant, just like that. So there is this interaction between the grassroots and the high level policy that is, at least in my opinion, poorly understood.
Yeah, difficult to achieve a circular economy in a linear system, to summarize it. Okay, thank you, Alberto. I think we'll stop there. And thanks so much for your comments. And perhaps we'll find a way to summarize the chat with some AI tool or something. So thank you much. And I'll pass it over to Louisa, I think.
Yes, thank you, Jens. My name is Louisa. Hello, everyone. I'm from the Accelerator Labs network at UNDP. And I'm just going to say a few closing words here. What I think is really important is that our shared curiosity was really what brought us together. We wanted to see how we can accelerate learning on the SDGs together. And at that time, when we started talking about 1.5 years ago, IKEA Social Entrepreneurship, Ashoka, and UNDP all already had their own learning networks for the SDGs. But we were curious what would happen if we would kind of connect those networks together. And yes, by connecting the social entrepreneurs from Ashoka's network with the IKEA co-workers and the UNDP Accelerator staff from around the world, we were really able to prototype how we can connect learning networks for even deeper learning on informality and circular economies. And it showed that for really understanding complex development challenges, we need to partner with other organizations. To do even more than that, we need to learn and unlearn together. And I think the key learning for me, at least, was really that informal businesses are the backbone of many circular economies, and they have a wealth of knowledge on circular practices, such as repairing, reusing, and repurposing materials. But despite these really, really vital contributions, the informal businesses often face stigma and lack recognition. So this work has also exposed a very clear need to acknowledge the role of informal businesses in circular economies more. Yes, and this work has also shown that by connecting learning networks with other learning networks, we're able to uncover insights that maybe no single organization could have surfaced alone. So if you work with a learning network, I also want to encourage you to consider connecting with other learning networks out there. You might discover some insights that you never thought you would. And if you have any questions about our work, about the white paper that we published, we can put it here in the chat again so you can access it easily. Please feel free to reach out to us. And yes, with that, I also want to send a very, very warm welcome to IKEA, warm thanks to IKEA Social Entrepreneurship and to Ashoka for this very productive first year of partnership. And of course, thank you so much to all the participants of the learning circles for your contributions that made this work possible. Also, warm thanks to Circle Economy for documenting and codifying all the insights and producing the white paper. And also thank you for everyone who joined today for your time and engagement. And with that, I think I'm ready to close us out, and I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your week. And again, feel free to connect with us. Thank you and see you next time. Maybe we can get some more tunes from Bas.
Let me try to get my my DJ set sorted. Oh, no, I have a sharing issue. I have a sharing issue, I believe. Oh, no, hang on. There we are.
Hello papi, mais qu'est-ce que ça? J'entends des bails atroces en main. À ce qui paraît, je te cours après. Mais ça va pas, mais t'es taré. Mais comment ça? Le monde est hyper. Tu croyais quoi? Qu'on se verrait plus jamais. Je pourrais t'afficher, mais c'est pas mon délire. D'après les rumeurs, tu m'as eu dans ton lit. Oh, dja dja. Y'a pas moyen, dja dja. J'suis pas ta cata, dja dja. Genre, en katana, baby, tu t'aides ça. Oh, dja dja. Y'a pas moyen, dja dja. J'suis pas ta cata, dja dja. Genre, en katana, baby, tu t'aides ça. Tu penses à moi, j'pense à faire de l'argent. J'suis pas ta daronne, j'te fais pas la morale. Tu parles sur moi, y'a air. Crash encore, y'a air. Tu voulais m'avoir, tu savais pas comment faire. Tu jouais un rôle, tu finiras aux enfers. Dans son Nakamura, je l'ai couché. Le jour où on se croise, faut pas tout faire. Tu jouais le grand frère pour me salir. Tu cherches des problèmes sans faire exprès. Putain, mais tu déconnes. C'est pas comme ça qu'on fait les choses. Putain, mais tu déconnes.